Hi, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of the Afghanistan Project Podcast. We are here today to talk about last week. The White House released a 12-page report about the Afghanistan withdrawal. And in response to that report, the National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby, said that he didn't buy the argument of chaos at the withdrawal, and he just didn't see it, not from his perch. We're here today with 4 people who did see the chaos of the withdrawal, and we want to give them the opportunity to talk about the things that they saw from the ground at Hamid Karzai International Airport during August of 2021. We have Aidan Gunderson, who is with the 82nd Airborne, Bobby Barnhisel, who is with the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, Connor McMurray, who was with the 10th Mountain, and Mike Markland, who was with the 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. Thank you guys for being here today. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So the way we wanted to do this tonight, we're going to let everybody talk separately about what they experienced, their particular role in the way that the withdrawal was carried out. And we're going to start tonight with Connor. We'd love to hear about what you saw, what you did, what it was like for you at HKIA.
So we... in the 10th Mountain Division, we're 2nd Brigade, Charlie Company 431. We were it was just our company from our battalion. So we got to HKIA about end of June because we were coming from closing Bath. So we had a lot of good time to get to know the base and, just kind of watch as everything kind of all the way drew down until the final moments, and then watch as, everything kind of unfolded right in front of us, boots on the ground. I remember it started either August 13th or August 14th. I can't remember the date, but we were ARF, which is Aerial Recovery Force, and QRF for the base for the actual HKIA proper. So when everything kind of started to make landfall, we all manned up into our Max Pros and fled out across the airfield. I remember not having any idea what the hell was going on. I just know that we got the call, so we jumped in the trucks and drove out there. Turns out that there were some people that said they were trapped in a tower, which I didn't understand because they were kind of manning the tower. Then from there, that's when Taliban made landfall into HKIA, and so all of the Turkish abandoned their posts from the towers, and then all of the ANA abandoned their posts from the towers and fled into the city. So we were completely unguarded from the outsides, and then we had to push towards each of the gates, the Abbey Gate, East Gate, North Gate, and just kind of try to spot check people trying to go over the walls. All of the embassies around us started closing. We had the Japanese embassy, the Indian embassy come back through the gates, and then that whole night following the 13th was a blur. I mean, just driving around, it was like, it's exactly as they tell you. And I know that these other guys can attest that. Driving around the base, there's cars just parked in places, and Humvees all over the place, Max Pros just stuck in between walls to try to fill gaps that people had managed to bust open and stuff like that. And this was already mere hours after shit kind of started to hit the fan. We then we're supposed to provide aerial support. 3rd Platoon was over the embassy as they did their pullout. So as all the embassy personnel and then our other platoon and whatever other forces were there were pulling out, we were going to be hovering above them to provide security. But that mission got nixed because there was about 10,000 people trying to push through the civilian PAX terminal. So we made our way around there about 6 a.m. the next morning, and it was just, I say it was a magnificent sight, but that's just the only word I think that could possess any kind of power to what you saw. I mean, just inside the actual airfield, there was, triple strand concertina wire and C wire just wrapped all the way around. There was already about 1,000, 1,500 people already inside the actual airfield. And so me, my platoon sergeant, my squad leaders all made our way outside into traffic circle, which is, like every airport, there's a little circle. We made our way out there and linked in with our First Sergeant Kelly. And that's really where that was the real culture. The first culture shock was right there. Because there was, people as far as the eye could see, it didn't stop. They were coming down the streets out of buildings, and there was 100 of us standing out there, with our dicks in our hands. We had no idea what to do. There was no plan. I was the RTO. I had the radio in my ear, and I was trying to talk to the commander, talk to anyone that was there, and there was no orders coming over the radio. And so from there, all hell really broke loose, and all the people figured out that we weren't going to shoot them, and we were just using, the guns to try and deter people and back them up and keep them in line. And everyone made a death sprint for the one gate that we had, had set aside from the sea wire to come through. So from that moment, every one of our guys jumped up into their trucks and closed the hatches, got in there safely, and all the people flooded past us. But me, my platoon sergeant, and my squad leaders were all kind of just standing there in the middle. And it was exactly like that scene from World War Z, where that kid, who's sick, and he kneels down and everyone just splits around him. It was exactly like that. It's like we were just bumps on a pickle. They didn't even notice us. And they had one mission to do, and it was to get inside the airport. So we found a way through the gate, and we had to, make our way through the crowd, and some Marines helped us over the sea wire to get back over. And that's when people started bringing us their dead kids, handing them to us to try to get us to save them, because they'd been trampled in the rush. And so I remember our medic got handed one of the kids, and he's, trying to perform CPR on her. And our platoon leader came up to him and was like, "Hey man, what are you doing? Where are we going to take her? We can't take her over to the Roll 2. And there's nothing we can do here. So you have to give her back to your family." So we had to give her back over the sea wire to her family. And then, it was just so out of touch with everything that I had to listen to that report that came out. I managed to watch the video, and the thought that there was no chaos is just ridiculous, because moments after that is when people started to trample people and use them as a bridge to get over the sea wire. And that's when the real shit fucking started. And there was, Marines and Army guys from 2 different companies, 2 different battalions, 2 different places on the earth, all stretched arm to arm, trying to keep everybody back. And it was just, it was just a fucking nightmare. You're out there, trying to push people back and tell them where they're supposed to go, but no one wants to listen to you. They all seem to think they have an idea of, the plan and how they're supposed to get out of the country, when that plan isn't, whatever plan they have isn't the one that we know, or the one that we were told, or the one that anyone came up with. It was just something they all kind of decided on their own. And we spent the next 10 hours playing tug of war with a giant airfield. It was, I remember I had the radio on back. I remember just turning it off because there was nothing coming across it. And it was about to die, and it had been 6 hours, and I hadn't heard my commander's voice once. I'd been calling up, but there was nothing coming over there. I remember looking over at my platoon sergeant saying, "Sergeant, what the hell are we supposed to do? Like, what's the plan?" And he said, "I don't know." Right? There was just nothing to do other than try and push these people back and get them to go to one of the 3 gates. And it was, it was a nightmare. It was a fucking terrible experience. Like, there was nothing you can say to them that they would understand. There's nothing you can do to them. And then, they're going to get mad at you for not being able to, point them in the right direction, or let them on that C-17 that's about to take off right behind you. And so, you have to push and shove, because people start swinging on you, and then you got to start pushing these people back. And it sucks, because that they're just trying to get out of there. But there's a little piece inside you that's like, man, I wonder how many of these motherfuckers were on the gate yesterday, right? Or on the walls, right? I wonder how many of these people are trying to get out of the country because they abandoned this place in its time of need, because they were scared and they thought they didn't have us to help them, even though it was only us in the end. I honestly don't remember how the people got off the airfield. We were there so long. That whole day blurs together into moments. And I think I just remember that everyone was gone, and that we were, assigned to North Gate. We we went over there, and the first time stepping into North Gate was just surreal in just the most awful way. Piles of trash and sea wire and water bottles and shoes and clothes and suitcases littered the entrance to this, big, 8-foot steel gate. And outside, all you can hear is just loud noise, right? You can hear people yelling, you can hear gunshots, you can hear flashes going off, smokes going off. And there's just no discerning what on God's green earth is happening out there until you step out. And there's, from one end all the way over to the other is triple strand concertina wire and people as far as you can see. And I remember we walked out there for the first time, and a buddy of mine who's standing right next to me looks straight in the crowd, and we see Taliban right there, clear as day, right, standing right in front of us. And his first instinct, like I'm sure everyone's was, he raised his gun, he was about to shoot that motherfucker. And so we had a, squad leader pulls him back and said, "Hey man, they're helping us. You can't do that. They're helping us." And so we're all like, what the hell is going on? Like, what the absolute fuck? There's no way. And so they're out there, and they're out there beating the living shit out of these people. I mean, they are beating the brakes off of them. And, we're trying to check IDs and trying to let all these people in. And it just, every shift became this mind-numbing thing where, you stepped out there and you had no idea what the fuck was going to happen.
And what was the demeanor like for the Afghans that were at the gate? How much chaos they must have felt very afraid because there was just so many people, right?
There was every emotion under the sun: fear, hate, love. You could look at three people sitting right next to each other and see on their face that they were all thinking three different things. The general consensus was hate, because people were handing me McDonald's receipts telling me that they have their papers and asking me to let them to America. And, you stand there and you're like, I can't, bro. Like, I don't know what this is, but it's not anything that's going to let you in. And so, we had to, it was, no matter where you're standing, because there's 306, there's dudes standing all behind the sea wire, with our backs to the gates. No matter where you stand, you have people throwing their papers at you or screaming at you or calling your name or, whatever it is. And it was just impossible. It never felt like the line was moving, if you know what I mean. Like, it never felt like we were making any progress into this crowd of people, because as soon as one person was let in, 10 more added to the crowd. As soon as we pushed them back 10 feet, 50 more people came and they pushed 20 feet closer. And the worst things I ever saw in my entire life were at Northgate. Just the most awful things. People were using, I'm sure all these guys are going to, they can understand that people were using babies as human shields to try to drive through the crowd. They were, there's pregnant women that we were trying to pull through, and they were reaching for them and trying to cut them open from end to end and stabbing these women to try to, because we were bringing them in, but we weren't bringing the men in. There was, people coming in and just throwing babies back into the crowd. And you have to sit there and listen to it die because you can't get out there. You can't do anything about it, right? You can't do anything about any of it. You just have to stand there and watch and try to save as many people as you can. I remember at one point the order came through that was just let all women and children in. Nobody else, just women and children. That's it. And so, when people say they can't, when that guy says he can't see the chaos, the only thing was chaos. There wasn't order. There wasn't measurements, right? There wasn't any scheduling that happened or any scheduling that we found out of, right? It was just, hey, you're going where you're needed. And when you get there, you're just going to be there for this amount of time, but we have no idea what you're supposed to do. We have no idea who you're supposed to talk to. We were arm in arm with Marines all day, every day. And it was amazing, right? Like, it was an experience that I think I would never forget, but it was like, I remember standing next to a lieutenant colonel in the Marines and him just telling his dudes, man, I don't know what we got to do, but you just got to do something, right? Verbatim, what comes out of his mouth, right? There's just nothing, there's just no known plan that was pushed down. And so, people saying that it was a success, it was not because of anything anyone did except for the people who were standing on the ground. Day in, day out.
For sure.
No matter
100%. Yep.
How long were your shifts while you were standing out there?
So we did 6 hours on, 6 hours off.
Okay.
Yeah, and we did that probably from the 15th or 16th all the way up until the day we left. We actually left the 24th of August. So we left 2 days for the bombing of Abbey Gate.
Okay. That's really incredible, and I can tell the emotional impact of that experience. I'm sorry that you had to see those things. Aidan, what about you? What kind of experience did you have while you were at HKIA?
I had a very similar experience, and like Connor said, there was nothing but chaos. Like, it's funny that he used that word because that's the only word I would really describe that. Like, there was no organization from the beginning. So I was with the 82nd, and we're on what's called the Global Response Force. Basically, there's one brigade that is ready to deploy anywhere in the world within 18 hours. I was on one of the deployments to Iraq in early of 2020. We did the same thing, but on August 12th, we got the call saying to assemble at our company, get ready to deploy to where we didn't know yet. I mean, there was a lot of possible options. Ukraine was an option. Somalia was an option. We really didn't know. So I think 2 days later, on August 14th, we got on the plane to leave for Afghanistan, which is actually my 21st birthday. I spent on the plane. So it was a good 21st birthday. Yeah. So we got there the 15th, and immediately it was chaos. I mean, we didn't even know where we were going to land until, like an hour before. Like, we'd stopped in to refuel in Germany and then Qatar, and then on that last flight, we were like, where are we going to land? And they're like, oh yeah, the president fled the country. We're going to Afghanistan. We're like, oh sweet. So are we landing in a firefight? Are we landing in a safe environment? And it was just, so it was really scary. I mean, I thought and of course, all of us, I think, were imagining that ramp dropping down on the C-17. It was just like D-Day, we're just start getting into an immediate firefight. But luckily, it wasn't like that, and it was honestly like there was just no plan that it was like scary because it was quiet when we first got there. Nobody was on the runway yet. So we went over to the U.S. military side of HKIA, and there was nobody there. Like, nobody. It looked like people had just left on a dime. Like, since I was a medic, I went into the clinic to look for some medical supplies, and there was still people's cup of coffee on the table. There was still some blood on the table from where somebody was drawing blood. It looked like people had just left like that, So it was really spooky. It was like, okay, that set the tone. We're like, oh, we probably shouldn't be here. You know what I mean? Like, nobody else is here. It was at least in that area. And slowly but surely it got more and more chaotic. We met with one Marine major who was on his way out and was like, yep, food, water, vehicles, shelter, whatever you can find, take it. Like, everybody's gone. Like, whatever you need, take it. Which shouldn't, that should not be the plan in the military operation. But really, things started getting chaotic through the night. We got assigned to guard some towers on the north side of HKIA. So we were not involved with the airfield yet. But we could hear over the radio how bad it was. We could hear how many people were getting on, and we could hear from how far away we could hear the chaos from the airfield. So me and my first sergeant, we needed a vehicle to get down there that could transport a lot of people and even maybe work as a blockade if we needed it. So we found a fire truck and, somehow started it up. I had never started a fire truck in neither of my first sergeant, but we got it started. I don't even remember how. So we drove the fire truck down there, and that's when I saw just how many people were on the airfield. It was insane. I mean, imagine a giant concert, times 10. It was crazy. There was just vehicles and people just pushing these people back, but it was like Connor was saying, just tug of war. The crowds were just going back and forth. And at this time, we didn't see it, luckily, but unbeknownst to us, 3 or 4 people had just fallen off of the C-17 that they were trying to get off of. And we just happened to be right there, right after. And we saw a large group of people in the middle of the airstrip, and we were like, oh, we should go out, see what that is. So we stopped to see just a pile of rags, because the men had thrown the rags over the body. And it looked if you told me well, obviously it was a human body, but if you had told me it was, I would be like, that's a lie, because it was just a bloody pile of just mush, and it was still smoldering from the friction that the body had caused, and when it hit the concrete, it was like still smoldering. And that was like the first time that I couldn't really comprehend it. I was like, these people are trying to flee their country so bad they're hanging onto an airplane. Like, that's a pretty dire situation.
To do that is just so insane to think about, right?
It's insane to think about. I could tell you I would never hang on to the wheel of an airplane. I mean, that really put it into perspective. For like the first time, I was like, oh boy, this is not going to be good. At that point, we moved to, I believe it was, I don't even know if it was a gate. I mean, maybe it was East Gate, but there was some of another one of my companies from the 82nd that was there, Bravo Company. I was with Charlie Company. And they had been sitting on this gate for hours, and it was the same thing as, everybody else saw gates, just triple strand C-wire and just a sea of human beings with like no space. Like if you dropped a piece of paper in the crowd, it was never going to hit the ground. There was just so many people, and the first time I walked up to the crowd to get close, it was, an assault on like every sense possible. Like there was women crying, there was babies crying, there was babies you could tell were alive. There was people that like just getting crammed in between other people that they just had given up. Like I think unless other people were holding up, they probably just collapsed on the ground. And people are just yelling at you in English and in Arabic, showing papers, like the same paper that they all probably printed off from the internet. It was just awful. I mean, it was like Connor said, something that I don't think anybody should ever have to see. It was innocent people just trying to flee their country in the worst situation possible. And early on, it almost felt like we were trying to fight the civilians more than we fight the Taliban. Like Connor said, they won't listen to anything other than violence because that's the only thing they've ever seen, pretty much, from the Taliban. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask, you responded to the Abbey Gate bombing too, correct?
I did. So yeah, this was all the first day that we were at Eastgate, but eventually once, more people finally started getting there, we got into a good rhythm. We filled in for a security position down right outside of Abbey Gate, right outside the walls. We were filling in like, I don't know, 100-foot gap in the fence where people were coming through. But we started going down to Abbey Gate because my headquarters element of my company wasn't pulling shifts. So like my first sergeant, my CO, the RTO, me, the medic, the mortars, we were doing like radio guard shifts, and we could hear like the chaos from Abbey Gate. It was literally gunshots 24/7, screaming 24/7. And it just sounded like the Marines were just getting the shit handed to them. Not that they couldn't handle it, but it's an awful situation. So we went down there to help, to see if there was anything we could do to help. And that was the first time seeing Abbey Gate was crazy, because it was that you could smell it before you could see anything, because nobody had anywhere to go to the bathroom. So there was just, piss and shit all over the place, just covered by trash. So the smell was horrible, 24/7, awful smell. And yeah, it was the same thing that we had been seeing the whole time, just on a way worse level. People were standing in a canal of sewage, and C-wire was in the canal. I treated one dude who had a bullet wound in his foot because the Taliban knew people were standing in sewage water, so they shot him in the foot so he would get infected. I saw the Taliban paying little kids to go fill up water in the sewage canal and then sell back to the civilians that were pretty much dying of dehydration. And yeah, same thing Connor said, just moms holding their dead babies, just crying. They didn't want to let them go, but they couldn't do anything else. It was either they turn around and get killed by the Taliban, or they just stand there and hope to God that, we pull them through and get them on the plane. And a lot of them didn't get pulled through, Like I had one dude to show me his North Carolina driver's license, and spoke perfect English. He was like, hey man, I'm from North Carolina. I came back like last month to see my family, and now I'm stuck in the shit canal. And I was like, hey man, I can't pull you through right now. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was pretty awful.
So who could you pull through then if you weren't able to pull through somebody with a U.S. driver's license?
Yeah, so I think Mike might be able to talk about this better because I wasn't actually working the gate. I don't know what they were specifically given, but basically it was like SIVs, passports, and I think there was another thing. my company got involved with Operation Pineapple Express, which was a group of veterans that started basically shuttling people through the gate using us. So my commander, who had a government cell phone, got a list of like already vetted groups that were coming through, and there was a passcode. We'd find these people, we'd match the passcode, we'd match the names, how many was in the party, and then we'd pull them through. So we kind of had our own weird little niche thing going on.
Mm-hmm. And so when the bomb goes off at Abbey Gate, where are you, and what's going through your head once you hear and feel that explosion?
Well, luckily I was about 50 feet away from the bomb, 50 feet to 75 feet behind the really tall really tall T-walls. Me and my first sergeant like to joke that smoking a cigarette saved our life, because we were going down to Abbey Gate, but before we went down there, we were like, oh, let's smoke a cigarette. This is probably the last time we're going to go down there, because they were going to close the gate in about an hour. So we smoked a cigarette, relaxed, and then we went down there. And we're pretty sure about the time it took to smoke that cigarette, if we didn't smoke it, we would have been standing like right next to it, because we were going exactly to where the IED went off. So luckily I wasn't there. I was close enough to where my ears were ringing, and I felt the punch in my chest. And I don't really know what I was thinking. It was a mix of, go run and save the casualties, but also like, holy shit, there could definitely be a secondary attack. Like that is the MO of a lot of these, groups in the Middle East. So I was scared of a secondary attack, but I saw my first sergeant running, so I had to follow him. And that's a whole other thing. I mean, that was awful in itself, of course.
I can't even begin to imagine that. And I'm sure that we can talk more about Abbey in a bit if we have some time at the end. Okay, Mike, sure. What about you? You were at Northgate, is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. So pretty much leading up to the events, August 16th, we're at Al Asad in Kuwait. We just got there from Al Jabar, and we're waiting, and things keep getting pushed back because the flight line of the planes is getting clogged up with a lot of people and personnel, and guys like Aidan and Connor on the ground over there trying to link arms and clear the runway essentially for us to land. But once we do land, it's around the 16th or 17th. It's kind of a blur for me, because a lot of those days meshed together in the beginning. But once we land, I'm greeted by the command element, pretty much of 1-8. And what they do is that at that point, with me and my platoon sergeant and a few other trusted dudes, he gives us a familiarization of the compound in a hot-wired vehicle. We're driving around, and he's showing us, where everything kind of is located and what we need to be worried about. And at that point, it's already like he's preparing us, and he's also telling us what just happened, because we were unclear of what was going on before we would land, because a lot of the things weren't communicated correctly. A lot of the things were like an unknown. Like Aidan said, if we were going to land in a combat type situation where we're running and gunning out the door of the C-17, or if we're walking off with all packs and everything. So we wind up figuring out what we're doing. Eventually, the guys are put on rest, and a lot of the command element, or the team element, and team leaders, squad leaders, whatever, of the platoon I was a part of, we go out and do kind of like a leader's recon, and we're checking everything out. There's weapon caches all over the place. Weapons that are left by the U.S. Air Force, weapons that are left by U.S. military, and then just a boatload of guns that nobody knows where they came from or what they're doing there. So it was our job then. They were handed off to us because we could take the responsibility to destroy them or demill them. So we created a cache, us and a bunch of other dudes. And immediately after that, we go to the North Gate to check it out. And that's when things are like, they're trying to figure out things at the North Gate. North Gate was a hectic area only because it's an entry and exit point. So in that situation, you're kicking people out the same way you're bringing them in, which makes things really rough. From there on, the first 3 days I was there, I was up 3 days straight. And our rest cycles looked like sitting in OPs for about 8 to 12 hours. We were sitting OPs at the North Gate. The North Gate was hectic in its own. When one Constantine wire would get compromised, we would put another Constantine wire over it. The things I saw there alone, to describe anything less of chaos would be insulting almost. I saw the full circle of life from picking up pulseless bodies to at the same time helping women go into labor, which is something that as an infantry rifleman, it's not something you're really trained to do, but it's something that as a man or as a human, you just have the impulse to do. Like, of course, I want to be able to help in this environment. So we're sitting there. We set up ECP and ECC, pretty much a primary checkpoint and a secondary checkpoint. One's checking bags to push these people through, and then the second one's checking personnel. The first one, you're checking bags. So once you check a bag, you push the person through to the secondary checkpoint, and you're checking them at the ECC. What that does, though, is that creates a huge congestion and a way bigger insider threat, where you have these, if not hundreds of people, of Afghans and refugees trying to flee the country, all accumulating in a certain area, because you can only accept so many at the same time. You had a platoon working this, which is 30 plus guys at most. So it was hectic, and the insider threat was ridiculous. We had a lot of people just waiting there for a while. A lot of the things that the Marines were in charge of were not a part, and this is not a problem, but I think it's just something that should be noted. Being an infantry rifleman and being in that combat type area and understanding Afghanistan, the mission of the infantry rifle squad or at all is to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy with fire and maneuver, and repel the enemy's assaults with fire and close combat. We have Marines doing stuff like, every Marine, and this is stuff that I think is worthy of note because it severely got thrown to the wayside. Regular E3s or E4s, besides a corpsman or a doctor, throwing on tourniquets, helping with casualties, doing CAS evacs. We would have easily 10, 12 CAS evacs a day and that's moving a body or a casualty from the gate to the secondary checkpoint. And we ran out. This was happening so often that we ran out of litters that we would use ladders. We would use anything that could hold up a body of some sort. And then at that point, you have a problem because you have a separated, whether the individual's with a group or whatever it may be, you have a separated party, and then you have to find out how to hand them off to the correct echelon and so on. But a lot of it at the North Gate was it was hectic because we were kind of handed the position when we did a turnover. Being at the North Gate, the command element was with us the whole time. There was nobody that was down. I was seeing, E8s and E9s sitting there with us that are E4s and E3s doing the same thing we were doing the whole time. Controlling the access point was difficult because a lot of them would show up with computer printer paper of just a regular visa printed out. It could have been a screenshot. It could have been anything. I was unsure of what actually was supposed to be credited. So there was a lot of things too with WhatsApp group chats. Like Aidan said, he was part of the Pineapple Express project that was going on. We didn't have much knowledge of that. We were doing what we were told, and we were constantly there 24/7. So getting them through and getting the right people through was really hard. And it was the constant flow of people was rough because you had the ANA that was out there with bats or with an AK and using the buttstock to deter people, or you had random CS grenades, because we had a whole bunch of things going on. We had smoke grenades and we had anti-riot grenades, where every so now and then there would be a CS gas grenade that would end up in the mix somehow, and it would never be us, but somebody would throw a CS gas grenade. A lot of the Marines the first few times did not have their gas mask on their person, so it made things pretty rough. We would lose the gate and have to gain it back, which was a whole different battle. But from that, you have problems too with the Taliban. We were right along over at the North Gate. We were right along that Sheffield, if I'm saying it wrong, but Sheffield Road, which is a main road, constant traffic, 24/7, which is a huge problem because anything with a VBID or personnel transport is a big deal. But the Taliban would run a kind of like a show of force down that road, and every day it would get more and more like there'd be more and more cars incorporated into that, and they'd be on the car with a mounted light machine gun or whatever it may be, rolling their colors, the Taliban flag up as well. But they would drive by too sometimes with civilians' heads in their hands or civilian bodies and drop them off at the gate, and then we would get passed up a body or a headless corpse, and we would have to do something with that. Overall, like seeing the desperation was it was rough to deal with, because at the same time that you want to help these people, you also have to conduct this mission with order and some sort of regulation on it, which you have to then compromise a part of yourself that you're like against other humans. You know, to get people through orderly, sometimes you have to be a brute and have to be, you know, a show of force. At the same time, getting these same people through that you probably just shoved down to the ground or whatever it may be to the highest sense. I've seen a lot of people use women as shields. A lot of people use children as shields, or hold up a lifeless baby to try to get in, which was something that was like, you see right through it, and then you see the cowardice in them, and it's like, it makes it hard to be invested in the, you know, helping them all out to the fullest as we could. But from there, our rest cycle looked like something of an 8 to 12 hour OP post that we would hold. Platoon internal, we would rotate squads. There was about 6 or 7 OPs that we would hold, and we would take indirect fire from them 24/7 from mounting. And right across the way, we would have a Taliban checkpoint where you would watch the Taliban at that point eradicate civilians if need be, or control the situation at hand that they had. They control it very different. Even the ANA, although the ANA was trusted and trained by the U.S. military, some things go to default when it comes to that. They don't really practice things like the military does of the United States, and they would shoot into crowds a lot of the times, or shoot right above people's heads to a degree where it was almost negligent. There's a lot going on, and flashbangs constantly. We had all this equipment that a lot of us as 0311s or 03s in general, or just the infantry, weren't trained with. Constantly being handed flashbangs or anti-riot or non-lethal stuff, and a lot of these guys never had any training with salt or pepper rounds for a shotgun, or rubber rounds for a 320 grenade launcher. So these rounds, they have a lethal range, and to understand the lethal range is very important. But being handed the round and understanding the lethal range is two very different things. So on top of that, flashbangs, not a good understanding on those. 9 bangs. 9 bangs are similar to a flashbang, but it happens 9 times. There's a lot that went on that was just, there was a lot of learning on site that needed to happen very quick. And you needed to be able to trust the guys around you to do that just as much as you can. And thankfully, you know, we had a good group going there. I never doubted them in any combat sense, especially for the Marines. The list of things that goes on further from being an infantry rifleman that we had to deal with is, it's worth note. So to say something wasn't chaotic is incredibly insulting to me, because then we're pushed into this position to try to validate or make these things seem true to people, because this whoever may say these things, a politician or not, have some sort of position of influence, which is incredibly scary to me. But even just the sense of not being able to communicate with the Department of State correctly, because we would get people in and then we would have to kick them out in the same sense, and it's a heartbreak for everybody. Nobody wants to be involved with working really hard to get certain people in and then realizing that they don't have paperwork and then kicking them out the same way. Food and water was very minimal. It was very hard, because then when the refugees would come through, they wouldn't have food, and then we would have them waiting and collecting for a while. So we would have to then share the food that we had. And I would always pack my pockets for a day, and the guys in my team as well. But we would have to then share the food and water with the refugees around us. So we also, on top of that, towards the end, which is another thing that was really sad for us, is at the very end, we demoed a lot that we could. Not everything, but we tried our best to demo and destroy and demilitarize everything that we could. And that goes from MRAPs to vehicles to everything that we possibly could. After that, after we destroyed barracks, because the Turkish left, they fled before us. And of course, the United States Marines were the last ones to leave, or of my knowledge, the last infantry battalion to leave. And we then had to go back in after we destroyed all these barracks and all these living quarters and fix them up, which to me was a weird thing to do, considering we're now handing the compound off to a known enemy for the past 20 something years. So cleaning up the barracks and making these things all livable again was silly, and it was an incredible risk to take, especially in an active combat zone, especially with the tensions rising as we're coming up on the deadline. And which is something to note too, the deadline was pushed from September 11th to August 31st, and that happened while we were there, which crunches everything, and then panic starts happening, and as far as you can see with your eyes, there's people trying to get out in desperation. So there's a lot of that encompasses what I'm trying to get at. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, Mike, you made me think of something while you're talking there. You're talking about all the different tasks that you guys were assigned, and it made me think of this article I read a while ago, and I don't know who said this quote, but some officer said, my Marines are trained to be killers, but I was never more proud of them than when I saw them holding a baby or comforting children and women. And I think that's just like such a true statement of, just the broad tasks that you guys had to do. And you brought, so much humanity to people that were in the worst days of their lives. So I think that's something really important to remember.
Yeah. You guys, I haven't even heard half of the things that you're saying. And it's that you had to go through so much, and it's really incredible. I'm glad you're here talking about it all. It's very emotional. Bobby, what about you? You were at Abbey Gate. What was that like?
Yeah, so I was part of Echo Company. We actually were pretty much all over the place. So one thing off the bat, out of the statement talking about, how there was no planning or anything else like this, and they were just handed nothing to work with, that's completely false too. My company was the crisis response company for the SP MAGTF. So we were charged with reacting anywhere within CENTCOM for a multitude of reasons, whether it be, embassy reinforcement. Never in a million years did we actually think NEO would be the thing, or, reinforcing troops in contact, reinforcing the embassies wherever they are. The first time that I was told by my higher commands, not even my battalion commander, but above them, to start looking at Afghanistan was May 4th. So over 3 months prior to us actually going in there, we were told, hey, start looking at Afghanistan for an evacuation purposes. And then on top of that, talking about little planning or anything else like that, I don't know if this has been put out in the media or not, and I hope it does. One big failure as far as the planning goes is the rules of engagement. I think all the guys here dealt with it as well. But one thing I want to touch on real quick. They went through the rules of engagement in a few different things. One area that I was especially concerned, and I think you ask any service member that was there, the two classes of people that we were most concerned about getting out, our fellow American citizens and Afghan interpreters, and those that helped us throughout those 20 years. Maybe that's just my opinion, but I have a feeling it's amongst everyone else. One of the ROEs is collective self-defense. So if you see someone taking contact or being assaulted by the Taliban, whatever it is, you have an inherent right to defend them as if they were, someone else wearing an American uniform. That covers NATO allies, that covers embassy personnel, all these different things. The one classification of people that were not included in collective self-defense were SIV holders. So you have 20 years of interpreters helping us and their families and anything else like that. And if I see someone, 200 yards away holding up a special immigrant visa card and they're starting to get assaulted by the Taliban, I have to just watch them get killed. But either way, May 4th comes around and Echo Company and my battalion leadership start looking at Afghanistan. We started doing a bunch of, evacuation rehearsals, building stuff from the ground up. I believe it was about August 12th that we were officially told, hey, the evacuation is going to go. I got it. August 15th rolled around, myself, a couple of my snipers, and then my company gunny and a lot of the battalion staff is in a conference room. It's about 11:30 in the morning. And someone comes in and says, hey, you need to get on a C-130 right now. You're going to HKIA right now. So I think about 4 or 5 hours later, we jumped on a C-130. It was about a 6.5-hour flight, just based off that aircraft as compared to a C-17. But it was myself, some of my headquarters, and about 45 Marines from my 4th platoon. So about 50 of us total from my company, and then battalion leadership. On the flight, we're starting to get passed around pieces of paper that the pilots are getting, and it's first saying one of the first things that came across was airport perimeter breached, people on the airfield. You say the word breach to a military member, breached is something very specific. It is an intentional act to detonate something or forcibly gain entry. So immediately we're starting to think, okay, we're like these other guys said, we're going to get in a firefight as soon as we land. And I'm stuck in this, metal airplane when we land. But we get another piece of paper about an hour before landing, and it says, "Hey, airfield under control." And that was, some of the guys on here in 1-8 that did that. And then as we're on final approach to the airport, I saw a green laser come through the window of the C-130. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, we're getting lased. We're on final approach over a populated city that is controlled by the Taliban right now. We'll see if we make it to the ground. Thankfully, we did. And then it was eerie. It was quiet. People come up to the airplane and we're like, hey, come on over. We ended up throwing bags down. And then about 2 hours after that, we were down by the passenger terminals, helping out 1-8 with the crowd. So this was the morning of the 16th, about 6 a.m. or so. The 16th, give it maybe another hour, and then all of a sudden, it's World War Z of people swarming across the airfield. For the next 12 hours or so, hopefully everyone's seen the footage and things like that of, just tens of thousands of people everywhere. A surreal moment was those individuals falling off that C-17. I saw it start to taxi down the airstrip, and I turned and looked to my company gunny, Gus Martinez, and I just told him, I was like, those people are about to die. And whether they fell off or not, they're gonna just freeze up there. But then all of a sudden, a weird hush comes over the crowd. And then sure enough, we're seeing this plane take off, and then you just see one figure after the other start to drop off. So that was the first moment that okay, this is beyond what we expected. Even later that night, I think the first gut punch for me, and one of the other guys here talked about it, is you sacrifice some of your morals and some of the virtues that you uphold as a service member, and two, as a man or as a woman. I came around a little piece of the airport, one of the taxiways, and there's a airport sign right next to one of the taxiways that you'd see at any airport. And on the other side of it is a family of 7. It's a mom, dad, looked like maybe aunt, uncle, and then a grandparent. And then there was a little boy who was probably 3. And then maybe 3, and then a little girl who had to be no more than 8 months old. The boy was passed out in his father's arms, and the little just out of sheer exhaustion. And then the little girl was just sipping some water out of a cup that her mother had. And in that moment, the only people that I could think about were my wife and kids. I have a boy who was about the same age as that little boy, and then I have a little girl who's about the same age. Just picturing my wife holding them. I've never wanted to have baby formula in my backpack as bad as I did in that moment. And that word, but it is what it is. And, I'm a Christian. That was the first moment I've ever questioned my faith. So I looked at everything and I was like, there's no way there's a plan to this. There can't be. And that was a humbling moment for me. But, we finally got the airfield under control that night. Thanks in help to obviously the guys here and everyone else that was there, but then also with the NSU or the NDS from the Afghans, driving vehicles at 40 miles an hour into crowds because they were promised that they would be able to evacuate and they just needed to help us control the crowd. So we just see a column of trucks coming from the west side of the airport, and we're looking at the crowd. We're about maybe 100 yards away, and then we just see a vehicle plow into the crowd. And that was their method of crowd control. Unfortunately, it worked. But yeah, we finally got it under control that night. Then for the next few days, my company and some other attachments from the battalion ended up setting up a security position on the south edge of the airfield itself to get those planes in and out. Relatively quiet because at that point the Taliban had honestly taken over the outer perimeter and they were controlling who was coming in and out of the airport. Over the next couple of days after that, my company got split up between the Eastgate holding area, right next to Eastgate that 1A was manning, and then the evacuation control center, which was the last step before people got on flights. So two very different situations. My Marines at the ECC, still tough, but at the same time, there was a palpable sense of relief from the evacuees there. Kids are high-fiving people, families are saying thank you. My Marines and the kids are having water fights, shooting water out of water bottles and things like that. And then in the Eastgate holding areas, women going into early labor. There are elderly people passing away right there. We had people, and these are the holding areas. It's just that they were large fenced compounds for shipping containers, and we just threw people in there. No tents, no type of coverage. They were just there. We had people try to escape out of the holding areas just because they didn't want to be in there anymore. These people had been in there 2-3 days at that point. John Kirby mentions, we didn't miss a flight, this, that, and the other. Like, yeah, sure, we didn't miss a flight, but there were also times for 6, 7, 8 hours at a time that no flights were coming in or out. Right? I think any service member that was there can attest that. And we weren't told. Hours after hour, it's, we're getting asked by people that are trying to get out, where are the airplanes? And you have to look at them and tell them, I don't know. It's like, we're trying. I don't know. But 2-3 days, and then eventually we're able to get these people going. And then on the evening of the 22nd, my company took over Abbey Gate. We had Abbey from the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, up until the evening of the 25th. In that time, our biggest efforts were trying to just clear the clutter of people that were in there. Abbey was a major source of holding for NATO forces as well. And one big risk that kept happening, NATO forces would bring in, they'd hold people there. And then sometimes, especially at night, some NATO country has maybe, we could say, 50 to 60 planned evacuees sitting just along the wall. And then those service members would go back to their barracks and go to sleep. No one to watch these people. No one to make sure everything is safe. No security. So it's just 50 to 60 truly unvetted people just sitting there, not searched, nothing. But eventually we get all that cleared out. We're starting to get a decent process. And then the night of the 25th, my company was ripped out with Gulf Company. And I was told by my operations officer, like, hey, We're going to get you guys a little bit of rest. And then we'll get you back down the evening of the 26th to help close down the gate. Like, all right, sounds good, got it. Because for the last few days, my guys have been running essentially, to an extent, 16 hours off, 16 hours on, 8 hours off. They'd be 8 hours actually at the canal, looking for documentation and things like that. They'd be 8 hours on QRF, and you tell a Marine to just sit out, hang out for 8 hours, they're not going to do that. So some did, a lot just went back down to the canal to keep helping. And then the other 8 hours, they got actual rest. So that was their cycle for about 2-3 days. And then, I debriefed the Marines, expect to go back down to Abbey at the evening of the 26th. I think it was about 8:30 in the morning or so on the morning of the 26th. My operations officer finds me and says, we need to send you in now. Okay, what happened? It's just like they pushed through where your guys' perimeter was, and it's bad. Okay, we'll get down there as soon as we can. So I think the first element of my company got down there around 10, and then we were fully down there by about 12, I believe. So for the next few hours, it's Gulf Company and Fox Company had just south of Middlegate. So Middlegate was our terminology for the gate that included the sniper tower. That Tyler Vargas Andrews, he was one of my snipers that Tyler was located in for the majority of his time at HKIA. So we had Middlegate down back to Abbey proper, and we were just getting people on buses as quick as we can because we knew we were going to shut down the gate. Over the next few hours, we get the repeated IED pending within 2 minutes, within 1 minute. In those moments, it's okay, pucker up real quick, get it behind some type of security. And oddly enough, the crowd knew what was going on too. They see us take a hardened position, they're going to start having some second thoughts as well. And then that goes on for a little bit. It's like, hey, let's keep it open. The Brits need to come through as well. We're going to keep helping them. And then a little bit before 5:30, boom, bomb goes off. And then, bomb goes off. My first words, my company XO was standing next to me. My first words to him were just, oh, fuck. And then I took a few steps forward because I think Aidan mentioned it. Secondary IEDs is absolutely their MO. They're going to initiate that first wave, get that shock factor in, and then as first responders are there to help, they're going to detonate that second one. But took a few steps forward, and I was able to turn my head and see where the detonation went off. I had a lot of guys running behind me to come, assist with whatever, and I just looked at it was a pile of bodies. I couldn't tell you how many. All I know is they weren't moving and they were just laying on top of each other. So I knew it was bad. A lot of people were just like, we need people. My biggest concern was a secondary, right? It felt like 2 minutes. It was probably 10 seconds. That secondary didn't go off, and we just immediately started pushing people to start evacuating. I've been proud of Marines a lot. I don't know if I've ever been as proud in that moment. You look at the amount of casualties that we took, and I think every single one of them was at the hospital within 20 minutes. You want to talk about a golden hour, you don't need to worry about that when you got dudes like that. You have Marines on their first deployment that are helping corpsmen conduct crikes. So inserting tubes into people's throats so that they can breathe. and then working an oxygen bag for the 15-minute drive to to the hospital. But I've never done it before, and that's what they did. They just knew what to do. Just absolutely incredible what they did. But eventually, through the 26th, we finally shut Abbey Gate. After everything was there, I sent some patrols back down to make sure no gear or people were left behind, because our biggest fear was that someone got killed and that fell into the canal. Because we just gained a harder position so quick that it was feasible that someone fell in the canal, but thankfully no one did. But we eventually turned over with, I believe it was the 82nd down at Abbey to hold that security while we started retrograde. And then, just like Mike said, we get our DNIL order, I think on the 27th or 28th, and we go to town, right? For 20 years of war on terror, Marines, Army, Navy, it didn't matter who. You have one of your buddies killed, you have about 3 hours to grieve, and then after that, you're going back on patrol and you get to exact your revenge. We didn't have that. So I told my guys to channel it into DNIL, right? And it was everything. Barracks, vehicles, TVs, like it didn't matter. Like these people are coming here. I don't break the TV. They don't need a TV. And from that point on, it was, okay, get ready to get home. And then all of a sudden, hey, we got to go back out. We got to start cleaning everything up. And it's like, what do you mean? It's like, yep, they threatened us. They said we will not leave HKIA until we come back and clean everything up that we destroyed. So we got threatened with staying there until we cleaned up. We did, and then finally we were able to get home. We got back to Saudi Arabia on the 29th.
Jeez.
That sounds like a very difficult time. I mean, everything you guys have described is very difficult to hear. I wanted to ask everybody before. Go ahead, Michael, if you have something.
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing to Bobby, and that's it was 2-1 Marines that pulled my 2 Afghans and their families out of Abbey Gate, and now they live about 20 minutes down the road from me, and I get to have Sunday dinners with them and their wives and their kids weekly. So you guys did a ton of good, and I owe you guys so much for that, and all you guys.
Yep, you guys did things that clearly no one knew what was happening. Nobody knew what was expected, and as our service members and veterans always do, you went above and beyond and did incredible things. I just wondered, before we sign off, I want to give you each a chance to talk about why it matters that we get this right, that we talk about the chaos and that we don't say that there wasn't chaos. So if anybody wants to jump in first,
I got to
answer that.
So we see what happened with Vietnam. Very similar story, but obviously the differences all compare. What's important to note is I'm in the VA now with guys who are next to me, and it's the first time that they're ever in the VA hospitals, and they have white hair or they have gray hair, and it's the first time that they're ever, because they heard they can get hearing aids for free, which is nuts to me. So the fact that what they did and what these guys did prior to me, that left a legacy, whatever it is, they got forgotten about and eradicated because of how, whatever it may be, like whether it's a politician or it's media or the constant flow of current directives that make you engage with things that it's a fast pace. A lot of people forget about things, whereas it directly correlates to me. So now I'm realizing I'm in this point where I have 15 plus hours of footage from on ground in HKIA. It's very important that it gets seen that these guys in Vietnam did not have. And I'm thankful that I have this. And it's an incredible tool to prove that there was chaos. And that's the very least of it. But to prove the actions and what our military did that's so above and beyond that's worthy of note. I have buddies now that they got out immediately after the Afghan deployment, and they're having problems proving that that their PTSD is correlated to their service because it's not annotated on their record, because we're having problems getting medals and awards for being an Afghan. We can't. A lot of my guys that I know, that they don't have an Afghan campaign medal, they don't have a combat action ribbon, or they don't have the thing that they're, that they should be in a sense owed because they did these actions, and they're having problems getting compensation for the problems that they're having in civilian life now, which is a direct correlation to like life nowadays. Like the military might not be for you for 20 years, but if you did your 5 and you did them honorably, or if you did your 4 and you did them honorably, then by all means, do what you have to do. But I think it's important now to realize that we have the power with social media, with media in general, to make this be known, and also make sure it has a mark in history, that whatever the narrative is, it's our narrative. Like generally, we were all there, like Aidan, Connor, and Bobby as well, and many others. And I'm not special. Everything I've spoken about today, I'm not special. Everybody I know did the things that I did, and would do them all again. But we can't let this go. We can't let dust collect on us. We can't let this get demeaned or even degraded by somebody saying that there was not chaos, or from whatever perch you sit on that you did not see it. That to me is blasphemous, and it's an insult, and it's something that veterans are used to taking, and that's fine. But nowadays, I don't think that you can get away with that, and there needs to be some sort of standard going forward. I think that's pretty well understood. That's all I got.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
yeah, I'm good, Aidan.
You good, Mike? Okay. Well, I mean, everything Mike said is perfectly on point as well. But I think it's also important for, the healing of us veterans, right? Even not the ones that were in HKIA, but this was America's longest war. There's entire generations of us, of young men and women like us, who went over there and served to protect our country, right? But if those 20 years just get swept under the rug and forgotten because nobody wants to take accountability, all of us are going to be like, well, what the fuck? Well, why did I go over there? Why did I lose friends? Why did I lose family for a war that we don't even talk about anymore because nobody wants to take accountability of it, or nobody even really wants to talk about it because it's hard to talk about. So that's why it's important to me, and that's another reason that I joined Operation Allies Refuge Foundation, which all of us are in. I don't know if Bobby is involved yet, but I know Mike and Connor is in. But that is a huge part of our entire goal as an organization, is just to keep this in the public sphere so people keep talking about it, so us who are still struggling can heal. Because if we never get closure, if we never get answers for why we can't heal, we're going to be stuck in this perpetual circle of guilt and shame, and there's a lot of things that I could say to my brothers and sisters and myself that it wasn't for nothing. But it's so easy to focus on that negative when the highest levels of our leadership and our military aren't even talking about it, and saying that frankly, it wasn't that bad. It was, there was no chaos there. You guys were everything was organized. You guys had fun over there, right? So that's why it's important to me, and that's why it's important to our nonprofit Operation Allies Refuge as well.
It's so true. I mean, I know there's so many veterans out there that are just wondering if their service mattered, if the sacrifices they made in Afghanistan mattered. So it's unfortunate that it's being handled like this.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And they always mattered. There's no question. And I think we do. You're right. We have to find the way to make that so well known that all of those sacrifices mattered, that time is not for nothing. So I'm glad that you guys are doing that at OAR. What about you, Connor?
Yeah. I mean, like a lot of what Aidan and Mike have said before me is that I think that it's our duty to carry this cross for the people who can't. There's coming back. We had our whole battalion and brigade and division try and keep this under the rug and push us to the wayside and try to shout down our story. And I think that it matters that the people of the world, know the lengths that people went to, to protect, the freedom of democracy in the United States and more importantly, the people that were next to us. It's a moment in history that we can't let go by. The largest humanitarian, civilian evacuation since, Vietnam. It's a big deal. And I think that we owe it to those who are no longer with us, to make sure that the world knows their names, that the world knows their stories. Like we got back and, a week and a half after we got back, a buddy of mine killed himself because, he was drunk in his garage and he hung himself. Right. I know, countless of my friends that were there with me, trying to take their own lives, me included. Right. It gets to a point where, we have to speak out, because I know that if I had, the support that I found in OAR and the support that I found, in other places here back, stateside, that maybe, I wouldn't try to do the things I did. Maybe my friends wouldn't try to do things, maybe they would have known that we all have a voice and that we all, aren't as truly alone as we feel. And so I think that it's important to make sure that that number 22 a day goes down every day, that we can make it go down. It goes down. And that's all I got.
Bobby, what about you?
I think some of the biggest things, one, and any service member, take an oath to the Constitution, takes an oath to protect this country, and primarily, you don't protect the country, you protect the people of the country. HKIA was the truest form of that, and every single one of the guys on here, and then specifically everyone else that was involved with it, physically put themselves between their countrymen and tyranny. The biggest issue is that shouldn't have had to happen in the way that it did. Furthermore, you have an American population that looks at the withdrawal and looks at the counter narrative that's been pushed ever since. How, as an American, should you trust the government that if you're ever put in a position like that we're actually going to come get you? It's tough. I'm pretty sure it was Reagan, one of his speeches talking about the U.S. as a beacon on a hill. Right now, I don't know if we're that. Both here collectively and then around the world. I don't know if, unfortunately, if the world population looks at us in that same light anymore. And I think, the withdrawal is just one piece of it. And as some of these guys said about, some of the struggles that they're dealing with and things like that, we kind of covered it earlier, but making decisions and having to do things that go against who you are as a man, your virtues as a person, I know for a fact I have blood on my hands of innocent Afghans that we couldn't evacuate or didn't. Right. That first day we were sent like, hey, who meets the criteria? I still have the pictures, but I was sent a picture of a 3x5 posted note card with blue pen on the front, had blue passports, green cards, SIVs, U.S. Embassy personnel, and then one other category. And then on the back side of it was NATO nations that also fall under it. That was written by the ambassador. So that 3x5 note card of who was qualified to get evacuated, that was our guiding principle. Like that's crazy that we're told who to evacuate on a postcard or a 3x5 note card. But I think just as far as the service member that was there and that participated, moral injury, that term's getting thrown around a lot more now. It's tough knowing there are so many airmen, soldiers, sailors, Marines, whoever, that got put into a situation that they shouldn't have, and literally had to make life or death decisions, not for themselves, not for their buddy on their left or the right, but for an innocent civilian. We cling to moments of clarity or goodness, there was a 9-year-old little girl and a 7-year-old little boy. Their parents were killed by the Taliban on their way to the airport. They somehow fought their way through the crowd and came up to us, and it was, hey, we got to get these kids adopted. And what we were told by our, Department of State folks was that the U.S. was tapped out or had met our quota on adoptions. I didn't know that was a thing. So after that, I thankfully got the help of my chaplain, and he ended up getting those kids to Finland. And those 2 little kids are now hopefully living the life that they deserve to live. And what the people at HKIA did is gave men, women, and children alike a second chance at a decent life, or the first true chance they were ever going to get. I think, the people that put us in that position just owe it to us to say, hey, yeah, we fucked up a little bit, in a lot of ways. And this is what we're going to do to fix it, to make sure U.S. service members or our citizens are never put in this situation again.
Absolutely. You guys have all brought up some really... Oh, go ahead, Bob.
And as far as... Sorry. Just like the one thing that I know these guys more than likely deal with, and I do too. I think about 2 weeks after I got back, my dad and I were in the car, and he asked me, do you think the job was done? I said, no. I don't think there's a single service member that was there that thinks the job was done. The right thing to do, the ethical thing to do, is to get everyone out of there no matter what. We could figure it out who's safe, who's not at a medial point, but before they get to the U.S. But no, the job wasn't done. And, there's so many people there that unfortunately are dead now, guarantee are dead now, because we weren't allowed to evacuate them.
Well, I have 3 points I want to make before we end. And the first one is, Bobby, you're correct. The job was not done. But there are so many amazing volunteers. I think that the U.S. government is not doing its part of the job, but there are so many volunteers who've picked up that, that mantle, and they're running with it against the government. And that's part of the reason that Michael and I started this, is to give them the momentum and the support, and to make sure people never feel like they're alone, or like what they did doesn't matter, because it is being kept up no matter what. And the other point I want to make, I've tried to get a lot of information from our various organs of government about the ongoing failures to bring our allies back. And they always talk about the 124,000 that they got out, or however many they got out. They didn't get those people out. You guys got those people out. And I want to make that so eminently clear. It wasn't the U.S. government. It was absolutely every single one of you. And I think that a lot of people who are watching this tonight, or probably not tonight, whenever they're watching it, whenever they're listening to it, we're probably going to have a lot of veterans and service members who are going to have a lot of feelings about this. And maybe not all of them are going to be positive. And I just want to say, OAR, a great place, obviously, to be in community with people. There are so many other excellent organizations too. I mean, PB Abate comes to mind. Anybody who served can join PB Abate, and that's why Tom Schumann created it, is to have a community for anyone who raised their hand in defense and said that they would defend this country. So that's a good place to find community, which is, a really good antidote to the darkness. There's also groups like Fight the War Within Foundation. There are a lot of places out there to find that community, and to make sure that you never are feeling alone, or like those sacrifices and the work didn't matter, because they always did. And we are so appreciative that you guys came here to talk about those really hard moments and to share your time with us.
Yeah. Thanks so much, guys.
I was going to say just, thank you so much for having us on and letting us share our voices. And if you're listening, if you want to join OAR, you can. It's open for anybody, or if you just want to volunteer and help out. I think the website's operationalliesrefugefoundation.org. Check us out, follow us. Just any support would be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.